Hi, you guys. Erin here. I am dropping in with you today to talk about my favorite topic in astrology. We're going to be talking about the lunar nodes. And the reason I'm talking about them is because they are about to change zodiac signs for the first time since January of 2022. And yes, this is a big deal. A lot of people don't even know what the lunar nodes are. They are also recognized as Rahu and Ketu. They are the north and south lunar nodes. Okay. They also have other names as well, recognized as the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, or kaput and kata. Okay, now these guys are extremely powerful. They're said to rule over the journey of our soul, as in like from lifetime to lifetime. These nodes are what make eclipses happen. Not only that, but they're so powerful. In ancient astrology, they're said to be more powerful than the sun and the moon. In fact, they're said to be enemies of the sun and the moon. And so this is a very big deal. Okay. And some people, I've had people ask me this, like, why do you think eclipses are such a big deal? I've never had anything happen to me on the day of an eclipse. It generally doesn't happen on the day of an eclipse, but what eclipses do, they will either bring something into your life or they will take something out of your life. And that is because of the nodes. The north node, Rahu, brings energy in. The south node, Ketu, takes energy out. Okay. So depending on what kind of eclipse it is and how it's triggering your own natal chart, either within 2 weeks before the eclipse or within 4 weeks after the eclipse, or often approximately 90 days after an eclipse or approximately 180 days after an eclipse, something will either be taken or given to you in your life, okay, based on the eclipse. And by the way, those numbers are not just some made up numbers. They're all based on mathematical equations in the zodiac, okay? They're all based on aspects. But that's the way eclipses work. And these nodes changing signs are going to change what area of our life, what kind of energy we're receiving through these eclipses, and not just through eclipses, but just through the nodes themselves. And so the north node is moving into the sign of Aries. The south node is moving into the sign of Libra. But please do not think for 1 second that just because you are not an Aries or a Libra, that these don't, matter to you, because that's not the case at all. It tends to show itself more powerfully if you do have your sun or your moon or your rising in the sign of Aries or Libra. Or also it can be very, very powerful if you have your Mercury, your Venus, your Mars, your Jupiter, your Saturn, anything that you've got in these signs, something involving those specific celestial bodies will either be bringing energy in or taking energy out in your natal chart. Also, if you don't have anything in these zodiac signs, it still is depending on what area of your life, aka what house in your natal chart, these guys are transiting through. That's the area of your life that something is either going to come in or go out, or both. Okay. And sometimes it can bring really good things in, a brand new, fantastic career, a new house, new job, baby, whatever it is. Or sometimes it can bring things that are not so great into our life. And that definitely I see that more, unfortunately. I see that more than I see, the good stuff being brought in. That's just the way eclipses work. And that's based on this dragon energy that I'm going to go into. Now, on the other hand, the south node, it could take something out of your life that you've been wanting to get rid of. Say you've been wanting to divorce your spouse for so long. Finally, this south node eclipse takes that energy out of your life. Or say you had some sort of a growth, I don't know, I'm just thinking of bizarre things, that was on your foot or whatever. All of a sudden this eclipse hits that area of your chart perfectly and takes that growth out, or an illness. Or sometimes it could be things that we don't want to lose. Sometimes, often, again, unfortunately, I see this more often than the good things being taken out. Don't get me wrong. I definitely, it's probably like, I'd say maybe 70% good, 30% bad. Well, actually, no, that could be the other way around. It just depends on your karma. It really depends on your karma. But I've seen eclipses for not only myself, but for so many of my loved ones, my clients, over and over and over, something being taken away that they don't want to go away. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with eclipses. Okay. So what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to first describe to you what these nodes are. Okay, I won't go too deep because I don't want this to get too long, but I want you to understand what they are. I'm going to give you a tiny, short little story about mythology, about what's up with these nodes, where they came from, and why they work the way they do. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that they're moving into these signs and what this means for us as a collective. Without your natal chart, I can't go too deep into what this means for you as an individual, but I will give you some clues on how to see this for yourself. Okay, so one more thing I want to mention before I get rolling with this. I have studied these nodes in depth for, I think I really started falling in love with them around 2011, and studied from the Vedic perspective, also from the Western perspective. And going along through my studies, I came across Judith Hill, which some of you have heard me mention her before. And part of the reason I fell so deeply in love with her work is because she understands how powerful and important these nodes are. And a lot of the information that I'm providing for you actually comes from her books. Okay, she's got several books, many books. I think it's like up to 15, might even be 20 books at this point. But she has two books that are very specifically about the energy of these nodes. One is called Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation. The Lunar Nodes, Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation. And then also she's got one that's called Eclipses and You. And both of those books are really good for understanding the significance of these nodes and how they work with eclipses and so on and so forth. And not only that, but they'll also, especially the lunar nodes and Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation, it's a yellow book. That one will even show you how to really apply it into your own personal natal chart and trans. The other one will too, but it's oh boy, it's more of a kind of a basic training, I guess we could say that. Both of them are absolutely excellent. Okay, so there's that. Now, first of all, what are the nodes? They're not planets at all. What they are is the word node is actually Latin for knot, as in like tying a knot, okay? And what these knots are is they're knots that tie the moon's orbit. So here's the moon's orbit. She goes around in her orbit, right? And there's two knots that are exactly opposite each other, okay? And they tie that moon's orbit to the ecliptic plane, okay? And not only that, but the moon herself, she is said to rule, like she has influence on the memory that we have from previous lifetimes, okay? A lot of people, I do notice this, a lot of people who've got a really strong like moon energy in their natal chart, say their moon is in Cancer or their moon is conjunct the South Node or something like that, they have memories of their previous lifetimes. And most people, unfortunately, just kind of ignore this stuff. It's very unfortunate because it can be extremely helpful to understanding our karma here and what we're doing in this lifetime. Okay, so there's that. And as the moon goes around, as the moon goes up, she goes past the North Node. As she goes down, she passes through the South Node. Energy comes in through the North Node and goes out through the South Node. Okay, I'll go into this. But first, let's talk about a brief story about the mythology. And some of you have probably already heard this story before, but as story goes, it's ancient Hindu mythology here, that the Lord Vishnu was going around and passing out the potion for eternal life called the Amrita. Okay, so going around passing out this potion, but it's not for everybody. It's for very specific gods to have eternal life. Well, a demon came up and stole the potion, stole the Amrita and drank it. So that's not good, right? A demon who drank potion for eternal life. Well, then the sun and the moon, they caught the demon. They caught him and they brought him back to Lord Vishnu, like, hey, we got him. And as punishment, Lord Vishnu cut off the demon's head. Okay, but the demon had already drank the potion. So now what we have is two entities with eternal life. We have a head and we have a tail. Now, over time, that's kind of somehow been changed into a dragon. I'm pretty darn sure here that the original story, it's a demon. At least that's from going deep into the studies of this stuff. But most people will refer to the North Node as the dragon's head and the South Node as the dragon's tail. Okay, so we can think of this as like dragon or demon energy. and they have this eternal life, right? Now, these nodes, again, the north node is the dragon's head. It's kind of easy to remember because the north, I think of north is up and this is the north. And that's where energy goes in through the dragon's head and goes out through the south node, the dragon's tail. Okay, so north, south. All right, now they also have several other names. In Vedic astrology, the north node is referred to as Rahu and the south node is referred to as Ketu. And also they're referred to as the north node is Kaput and the south node is Kada. Okay, now in Western astrology, well, actually, let's digress here. The nodes, what they do is, okay, as I already mentioned, the north node is where energy comes in, the south node is where energy goes out. And to give you an idea as to how these work, this is something that's, if you've had a reading with me, you already know this, but this is something that is so crucially important to understand. We all have a north and south node in our natal chart. We all do, okay? Whenever you were born, whatever zodiac sign those nodes were in when you were born, that's going to be in your natal chart, okay? So for example, and as I mentioned, these nodes, they always have to be opposite each other. So they're always going to be exactly opposite each other. For an example here, let's say you have, when you were born, the north node was in the sign of Pisces, okay? And then that would mean that the south node is in Virgo. Now, what this means is the south node in Virgo, that would mean that you've kind of already mastered that energy. You've already mastered the sign of Virgo from previous lifetimes, and you might be really good at that Virgoan stuff. But as you go throughout life, it becomes kind of like a drain point, okay? It becomes like an area of your life where things go out. It's a point of detachment. The north node would be kind of like unfamiliar territory, where it's like the future or where you're going to, okay? The north node up there in Pisces. So what I always tell my clients is like, you kind of want to obtain the qualities of the zodiac sign that your north node is in. Okay, so if somebody's got their north node in Pisces, you want to focus on developing the qualities of the sign of Pisces. And you don't want to necessarily entirely leave your south node behind, because that's like your comfort zone. So it's almost like, I've described it this way as well, where it's like you're surfing on a surfboard and you want to have your surfboard going in the direction of your north node. So again, using that Pisces Virgo example, if their north node is in Pisces, they want to be surfing towards the north node in Pisces, but keep your back foot towards that south node in Virgo, okay? Because if you let that back foot go, if you completely let that south node go, then you lose balance. And in Western astrology, the north node is kind of looked at as a benefic, meaning like it's a good thing. It's a lot of astrologers will describe it as our destiny, the north node in our natal chart as our destiny, which it kind of is, but it's also a point of materialism, a point that can become greed, okay? And the south node is a very spiritual point. It actually reminds me a lot of, Steiner's theory with the Lucifer and Ahriman, Lucifer being the spiritual point of detachment and kind of getting lost in mysticism and letting go of all material things, which sounds lovely and beautiful, but we're having a very physical material life, so we can't completely let go of all of it until that certain day comes when we're leaving this material world. But then, so that north node being Ahriman, being the more material side of things, okay? So they just remind me of that. I haven't found the tie or the connection that goes on there, but I feel like there is probably something connected to that. So anyway, in Western astrology, we're taught that the north node is all grand because it's our goal. It's what we want to go after. And that is true. That is very true. But it's in Vedic astrology or Jyotish astrology, or just in the East, they don't view the north node as good. They don't view Rahu as good. Can lead to addictions and again, greed, that sort of thing. And they focus more on the south node being good because it is that point of spiritual, mysticism, detachment, that sort of thing. And, I have absolutely nothing against that at all. But in my own personal opinion, I just kind of view it as if that south node, if all systems of astrology agree that the south node is the past and letting go of things and the drain point, then it seems if that's our past, it makes sense to me that we should kind of lean in the direction of the unfamiliar territory, go after that, the north node, the thing that we haven't obtained yet. So I always, encourage my clients, like, yes, focus on your north node, learn the qualities of whatever zodiac sign your north node is in and go after them, but don't ever completely leave the energy of that south node behind. Okay, so hopefully I'm going into that so you understand these nodes and how powerful they are. Okay, so where should we go next? Oh, another thing I wanted to mention is that south node can actually have a lot to do with sorrow. In fact, as I mentioned, the word kata, that is also another word for the south node. That word kata from the metaphysical Bible dictionary actually means sorrow through, what is it? Sorrow through, oh gosh, I've got it in my notes here. I want to get it exactly right. Bear with me here. It is, kata is sorrow brought on through errors of the flesh. Okay, so again, these things just have a huge influence on our life here. Okay, and that south node can definitely, they can both be sorrowful. And that's one of the reasons that it's so important to understand these nodes, is it's not, that north node is not just our destiny. It's not just like that. It has so much to do with our karma and how you obtain those qualities of the north node and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's that. Now I want to talk about how these nodes are changing signs. So the north node, again, that's the pump that brings energy in. Whatever zodiac sign that north node is going through up in the sky, we are receiving. It's like the north node is pumping that energy into Earth, onto us. Okay. And as an example here, the north node has been going through the sign of Taurus since January of 2022. Well, the sign of Taurus is the sign of money. Okay. It's the sign of banking. It's also very much about values and also about agriculture and food, specifically kind of more like produce, like things that are grown from earth that we eat. That's very much associated with the sign of Taurus. Like Taurus rules this area of the mouth, rules the taste buds, that sort of thing. So in 2022, first of all, start with the money thing. My goodness, the amount of the inflation that just blew up. I mean, we all saw it. We all saw the gas prices. Not only that, but the north node was right next to Uranus at a certain point. When any two celestial bodies or celestial points are next to each other, they blend together and they want to work as one. It's almost like you're holding the flashlight here and a flashlight here and you're putting them together. And it becomes almost like a stronger energy. So it's the north node pumping energy in through that sign of Taurus, then blending in with that Uranus energy. And Uranus brings abrupt technological changes, okay, like unexpected changes. And we had an eclipse that really triggered. I mean, I could go into so much detail here, but again, I don't want to make this too long. But we had an eclipse, a total lunar eclipse, that it was just so fascinating to watch the whole thing go down with the cryptocurrency crashes. In fact, right after that eclipse, it was specifically a coin that I think it was called Terra Luna that just completely crashed. And so many people had put, the word Luna, everybody's like naming their pets Luna and everything. Luna is so popular these days. And I think a lot of people put money towards that specific coin, and it crashed tragically. And then food, like what's been happening with our agricultural systems. I mean, it's certainly, this is not all the north node's fault. It's got a lot to do with Uranus going through Taurus as well, but the abrupt changes and the just forceful energy that's going on with our agricultural systems. I mean, the whole new thing with this thing called a peel, where like they're spraying some kind of gas. I don't know if I have this entirely right, but it's something like they're spraying gas on our produce, on our stuff that we're supposed to eat, that's supposed to make, an apple stay ripe longer or whatever. But that's, in my very strong opinion, gross. Like, I don't want something that has been sprayed with some sort of weird gas and putting that into my body. But things like that are going on with it. There was also something that happened in 2022 where it was something like 10,000 cows, might have even been like 20,000 cows that were found dead. Okay, that sign of Taurus actually rules, it's the bull, and it actually is, well, it's very strongly associated with specifically bulls and cows, and really kind of all farm animals. But that's one of the things that Judith very specifically mentions in her Eclipses in You book is when we're having an eclipse that hits the sign of Taurus, is be careful of your farm animals, specifically cows. And boom, of course, we end up with all these dead cows. There's a lot of suspicions behind that, but regardless, there's that. So as you can see, whatever that North Node is going through, it's bringing this rough energy in, okay? So it's moving into the sign of Aries. Now, Aries is a very aggressive energy. And please don't get me wrong, because it's one of my favorite signs of the zodiac. I happen to have my own Venus and Mercury and my South Node in the sign of Aries. And I just resonate with this energy. And a lot of people who know me really well have seen my Aries energy come out. Like, I can be very, very protective. And when I am, I'm protective of my family, my loved ones, myself. And when I am, it can really, that Aries energy can come out. So there's that. Now, Aries is this, it's the cardinal fire sign. Okay. When I say cardinal, what I'm talking about is force that comes through. Okay. And all the cardinal signs have a specific kind of force that comes through, but this is the cardinal fire sign. Okay. Fire energy. Okay. That it can overexert, it can ignite, it can blow up. Okay. In fact, a lot of, and please don't get me wrong. Again, if your sun is in Aries, I'm not trying to say that you're an aggressive person. A lot of them are. A lot of Aries can be very, very aggressive, but not all Aries are, because there's things that can counteract or even balance it out in the natal chart. I have a family member who is an Aries that I mean, I see the Aries in her now, but I wouldn't have guessed she was an Aries because she's very soft-spoken, but she has a very specific aspect in her chart that completely changes the Aries energy and brings it down to almost a level of shyness. But for the most, just the sign of Aries in and of itself is aggressive. It's, you know, when the engine starts and the ignition, that's Aries energy. And Aries is ruled by Mars. Okay. Mars often is referred to as the planet of war, which, you know, kind of gives Mars a bad name, but that's Mars's job. Mars rules aggression. He is dominant and masculine. It's very like, you know, war type energy we get from Mars. We all experience Mars. Some people have very, very weak Mars in their natal chart, and they don't have very much aggression, and they can't like stand up for themselves. Mars actually rules our muscles and our adrenals. Okay. Mars is what will ignite us to go do what we got to do. And that's what makes Aries what it is. Aries is the sign that will, let's go. It's, in fact, a lot of people who have Aries in their natal chart, like they'll work out a lot, they'll get super muscular. Aries rules the top of the head. A lot of people have a strong, let's say you've got your sun conjunct Mars in Aries. These people can have a very strong tendency for a hothead energy. In fact, I've even seen it before where their entire face will turn red. That's happened to me, not so much as an adult, but more so when I was a child. I was pretty darn athletic, and my face, not even just out of frustration, just all the blood would rush to my head. And like I said, I got my South Node, my Venus, and my Mercury all in Aries. So it's this energy that wants to, in fact, Aries, they'll overexert themselves and the energy literally just goes flying out through the top of the head. Okay. And it is the ram that will ram through what it wants to get through. So here we're going to be receiving that energy, all of us on Earth. And I'm not saying there's going to be a war, but there's potential for it for sure. Okay. I'm not feeling that. I haven't looked too deep into it yet, but that's the kind of energy that we're going to be receiving. Okay. Now, should I go into the chart first, or should I go to, let's talk about the sign of Libra. Okay. So the South Node, where celestial energy goes out, is moving into the sign of Libra. Libra is a sign of balance. It's represented by the scales. It's the sign of partnerships and justice. Okay. When you walk into a courthouse, most often they have like some kind of a symbol of the scales. That's Libra. That's the sign that wants things. A lot of people have a heavy dose of Libra energy in their natal chart. It's so important to them that everything is fair. Okay. And it gets really hard for them when it's not fair. And it's hard because we live in a very unfair world. Okay. this south node is going to be draining that energy out. Okay. Now that's what I'm saying. Like there's aggressive energy coming into the sign of Aries, and then the balanced energy of charm, and the sign of Libra even has to do with beauty. And like I said, relationships and partnerships, and the south node going through there. So that, and again, we're all going to be receiving that. We may have some sort of a loss of justice. Hopefully I'm wrong about that one. But that is what we are going to be receiving. Okay, so now what I want to talk about is how this could potentially affect you as an individual. So first of all, do you have anything in the sign of Aries? Is your sun in Aries, your moon in Aries, is your Mercury in Aries, your Venus, your Mars, your Jupiter, whatever it is, Saturn in Aries? If you do, this North Node is going to come up and it's going to transit. Like if in your natal chart, let me pull up a chart here. Let's see which one. I'll just pull up any random old chart to show you what I'm talking about here. Let's pull up the solar eclipse. That's going to be in October. Okay, so what we're looking at here is just basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac for we'll be having a solar eclipse on October 14th. But that doesn't really matter. But regardless, what we're looking at here is just a chart. Okay, everybody has a natal chart. Everybody has a chart that you can look at and see where the celestial bodies were when you were born and what made you who you are. Okay. And it should look somewhat recognizable to this. Okay. Now, what you would want to look for in your natal chart is this symbol right here is the symbol, technically called a glyph, for Libra. Okay. And in fact, that glyph for Libra, at least from my understanding, it is to symbolize the sun setting. There's that line, the horizontal line, that's the horizon, and then there's the sun setting. I've heard other descriptions as to why that's the symbol for Libra, but that's I didn't make the symbol, so I can't say for sure, but that the sign of Libra actually represents when the sun is setting. It's a balance between the earth, the energy of the sun over the earth and under the earth. Okay. And you'd want to look to see if anything, these are the celestial bodies, like here's Mercury, here's the moon, here's the sun. In fact, here's the south node. I should be showing you guys those symbols too. Here's Mars. You'd want to look to see if you have any celestial bodies or planets. I don't generally call them planets because they're just not all planets. The sun and the moon are not planets. To see if you have any of them in this sign right here. And then opposite that, you'd want to, this is the symbol for Aries. Do you have anything in your natal chart that falls into these signs? Because if you do, these transits could impact you pretty significantly. And for an example here, let's say you've got Mars in Aries. Woof. And it's like the way it works is, let's say you've got Mars at 3 degrees Aries. Well, then it wouldn't really hit you till the end of 2024. Okay, let's take a higher number. Let's say you've got Mars at 28 degrees Aries. Well, over the rest of this year of 2023, this North Node, the dragon's head, is going to come up and breathe fire on your Mars. Okay. And Mars, we already talked about Mars. Mars is the aggressor. Okay. This could be great for some people. For some people, it would be like, wahoo, I got all this energy. I'm going to the gym. I'm working out. I start running again. And for some people, it could bring in, like, all of a sudden you break out into a fever, or all of a sudden, it brings something into your life that is a frustration. Okay. It can work either way. And again, a lot of this has to do with your karma. Any good astrologer is going to be able to tell you if, whether it's going to be hit really hard or not hit so hard, or like if it could be good or bad. But I will say this too, though, in my opinion, I know that not every astrologer agrees with this, but I personally have confidence in human free will with our karma. Like, I definitely think the chart and the transits are like a roadmap sort of into our life. But I personally think if somebody's been making very, very poor decisions, if somebody's been, causing harm to people in some way, or even themselves, like, say they're abusing drugs, like really bad drugs or something like that, and stealing or something like that, then that kind of transit, generally speaking, is not going to bring in like wonderful things. It might be able to bring in something like, boom, I got to quit this stuff. I gotta raise my vibration and be a better person. But it could also be, well, let's just say you might not have the greatest karma. If you've been doing things that are not so great, you're just not trying to be at least the better version of yourself. Okay, so there's Mars. Let's say you've got Mercury in the sign of Aries. Then as this North Node comes up, okay, Mercury rules our mental function, okay, and also has a huge influence on our communication skills. So this North Node comes up and sits on top of your Mercury, then your nervous system could all of a sudden be super fiery and that sort of thing. Or all of a sudden you might have to communicate something. You might have to, all of a sudden you have to give a speech, or you have to get your book out or something like that, because Mercury is the messenger of the gods, okay? Or let's say you've got Venus in Aries, okay? Then all of a sudden this North Node comes up, because Venus is a benefic. Venus is lovely. She's what influences things like romance, and she's soft and she's feminine. So this North Node comes up and sits on top of your Venus. All of a sudden, if let's say you have a beautiful lady that comes into your life or something like that. Let's say you're a guy that's been waiting for, the love of your life. All of a sudden the North Node comes up and sits on top of your Venus in the sign of Aries, and this fiery, redhead girl comes in your life. It's a silly example, but it's true. That sort of thing can happen. But it could also be that all of a sudden the North Node sits on your Venus and something aggressive happens with a lady that you care about. Venus can also represent our daughters, any like female that's close to you. The moon is more mother, but sometimes Venus can be associated with mother, but generally it's more moon that's associated with mother, but other females, okay? That's Venus. Let's see, another good example would be, let's say Jupiter. Let's say you've got Jupiter in Aries. Well, that North Node comes up. Jupiter is he's the great benefic. He's the one who brings the luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy, but he makes things bigger. He's the great expander. So if that North Node comes up and sits on top of your Jupiter, you could all of a sudden have great luck, wonderful luck. All of a sudden you win a bunch of wonderful things or whatever it is. I don't know. Or you all of a sudden are like crazy infatuated with philosophy, wisdom, anything like that. That's Jupiter loves philosophy and wisdom and studying the ancients and that sort of thing. All of a sudden you get hit with that. Jupiter also rules long distance travel. All of a sudden, boom, I'm going overseas, that sort of thing. But it could also, North Node comes up and sits on top of your Jupiter, then all of a sudden you might gain weight or something like that. So much of this depends on your own specific natal chart. I'm just giving you guys some examples here, so you kind of can at least pull up your chart, look to see what you've got in the sign of Aries. Now we're going to go into the sign of Libra, okay? But if you do have something in the sign of Aries, just know that North Node is going to be bringing something into your life over this next year and a half. The North Node is going to be going through the sign of Aries until January of 2025, okay? So it's basically an 18-month transit, and this, over those 18 months, if you have anything in Aries, that North Node is going to hit it at a certain point, okay? And these nodes, they go backwards through the zodiac. They're almost always in retrograde. So the North Node is going to start at 29 degrees Aries, then go to 28 degrees Aries, then go to 27 degrees Aries. And in January of 2025, it'll be at 0 degrees Aries, okay? And then it'll go into Pisces, and that's a whole nother story. Okay, so Libra, let's say you've got something in Libra. Let's say you've got your sun in Libra, okay? Let's say you are a Libra. Well, at a certain point, this South Node is going to come up and sit exactly right on top of your own natal sun. That's your soul. That's your sense of identity. That's your inner being, okay? So something that has to do with yourself very well could be taken away, could be flushed away. It could be all of a sudden you don't have the energy that you thought you would. But we're also talking about the sign of Libra here. This could involve a partnership. All of a sudden your partner goes away, or all of a sudden you're just not feeling so beautiful, or your hormones go down. The sign of Libra can have a lot to, it's ruled by Venus, can have a lot to do with our hormones and the balancing of hormones. All of a sudden your female hormones go down, or something along the lines of you're just not feeling as charming as you used to be, or you're an artist and all of a sudden your art isn't as good as it used to be. The sign of Libra can have to do with art. Okay, so, or let's say you've got your moon in Libra. Okay, the moon, she represents our emotions, or represents really mother, but she rules over our emotions and our moods and our intuition, but she's very much associated with the mother. So let's say that south node comes up and sits on your own moon. Well, something can happen with your mother, or something could happen with as you being a mother, or something could happen where sometimes this will happen where it's like somebody was very emotionally attached to either their mother or just anybody, just super emotionally attached, can't let go of somebody. And all of a sudden the south node transits over their natal moon, and that south node takes that away. Okay, takes that attachment away, because that's the point, that the south node is the point of detachment. Okay, or let's say you've got, let's say you've got your Saturn in Libra. Okay, so Saturn is the one that makes us do our responsibilities. Saturn is the one who brings the discipline, the structure. Saturn is the rule maker. Okay, so the south node comes up and transits over your natal Saturn. Well, something that you've been trying to build, or something you've been trying to structure, all of a sudden that goes away, especially if an eclipse hits that. Okay, and I'll talk about eclipses in a moment here. But something that you've been trying to structure or build, or your responsibilities are something you're not able to fulfill your responsibilities, something along those lines very well could happen when the south node transits over your natal Saturn. Okay, now another thing to mention here is the houses. I'm going to pull that chart back up. Okay, so where was it? There it is. Okay, so let's again just pretend that this is just a chart. Okay, but pretend that you're looking at your chart. Okay, this is your natal chart. All right, the way it works is these things, I'm going to go through this quickly because I've already done this a lot and I don't want to get super repetitive, but the houses are these things that look like a slice of pie. And what I mean by I've done this a lot, I've done this in almost all, maybe not all, but a lot of my recordings, I talk about the houses because I'm a pretty house-based astrologer. I think that probably the celestial bodies are more prominent and the energy is more pronounced from the celestial bodies, but the houses are very important as far as I'm concerned. And as long as you know approximately what time you were born, you can figure out which house, which area of your life is being impacted by this transit. Okay, now keep in mind, these nodes are always opposite each other. So if something, when I'm talking about the houses, I'm talking about these things that look like a slice of pie. Okay, so if something is triggering over here from a north node, then over here is going to be hit by the south node. They always have to be opposite each other. So real quickly here, I'm going to go through these houses. Everybody is okay. This right here would be the first house, which is the house of self. If you see when you're pulling up your natal chart, and I understand that if you're using a website or whatever, I'm working with a software called Time Passages, but anything, whatever you're using, an app or software, it should look fairly recognizable. Okay. And what I mean by that is that there's always going to be 12 things that look like a slice of pie. There's always going to be 12 of these things. Sometimes if you're using Placidus, the houses are, some are going to be bigger than others and some are going to be smaller than others. Sometimes if you're using Placidus, you'll have 3 zodiac signs squeezed into one house. And I'm not going to have time to go into all of that. I certainly can help you with that through an astrology reading, but I want this to kind of be for everybody to gain from. Okay, so this right here is the first house. If you see in your natal chart that the sign of Aries, if you see, whoa, shoot, I'm covering it up. Hold on. Oh, there it is right here. If you see this little glyph right here where my mouse is circling, if you see that, it looks like the ram, okay? Not like that, but it looks like Aries, the Aries shooting energy out the top of the head. If you see that symbol over here on your first house, this is always the first house. It doesn't matter what this, whatever you're using, you should be able to see that there's a little number 1 somewhere around there. You see it on right here on this software. But if you see Aries in that first house, that means Aries is in your house of self. That doesn't change. Your natal chart doesn't change. Aries is if Aries is in your first house, it's going to be there forever. Okay. And whenever something up in the sky transits or goes through the sign of Aries, it's going to be going through your first house, your house of self. Okay. This is a very, very important house to understand. It's probably, in my opinion, like the most important house of the natal chart because it is the house of self and represents basically our life from infancy. Okay. So if you see Aries there, that means that this north node where energy comes in, the dragon's head, is going through your house of self. What that means is that it's time to focus on yourself. It's time to do stuff for yourself. And if you are, if that's the case, if you have Aries over here, then you have to have Libra over here. Okay, because they're opposite each other. Libra and Aries are opposite each other. So that means the south node is going to be going through your 7th house, which is the house of relationships. Okay, so when we experience a north node transit going through our house of self, that energy is coming in through the area of our life that rules over the self. And if it's going through then the south node's going through your house of relationships, something might happen with a relationship. And that sounds almost, I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want anybody to think that they're going to be getting a divorce because south node's transiting through the 7th house, because that's not the case. But sometimes it just means that you have to work harder, and maybe the relationship, you just kind of, just for 18 months, like, okay, not to say you need to walk away from the relationship for the entire 18 months, but rather this is just time I need to work on myself right now. Okay. And also that 7th house does not have to do with relationship. I mean, only romantic relationships. It can also have a lot to do with business partnerships or any kind of one-on-one relationship. Okay. And then if it's flipped around, if it's the other way around, if you got Libra over here and Aries over here, then what that means is the energy Aries is coming in through your house of relationships, and the south node is going out through your house of self. So it's just the same thing, but flipped over the opposite way. It's time to focus on the relationship and maybe build a relationship, or it could be aggressive energy that's coming in through the area of your life that rules over relationships. It could be turbulent energy that's coming in through your house of relationship, or it could be like super hot and heavy. If you got Venus in there and North Node comes up and sit on there, that could be a very romantic time. Okay. But that's a time when that would mean the South Node, if you have Libra in your first house, that means the energy is draining out through your house of self. And I had that experience, was it 2 years ago, approximately, where I definitely felt tired. I definitely felt drained. And actually what was going on was I was completely overexerting myself, working too hard and just feeling very, very drained. So there's that. Okay, the second house, this is the house of money, material possessions, and values. Okay, so if you've got Aries ruling this second house, it means energy is coming in through the area of your life that rules over your money and your material possessions and your values. That means energy is coming in there. That sounds great, right? Woohoo! We got money coming in through, we got the North Nodes bringing money in. Well, that's not always the way it goes. Sometimes it can, especially in the sign of Aries, it could be something aggressive where it's like something came in that you had to take care of financially, aggressively. Okay. Especially if you have something in there in the sign of Aries while the North Node is transiting over it. And if you have Aries there, that means you've got Libra here in the 8th house. This 8th house is the house of transformations, the house of other people's money and inheritances and taxes and debt and that sort of thing. But it's also this house that can also have to do with just overall serious life-changing transformation. Okay, so if you got Libra up there, then the energy is going out there. That might mean that you have to be completely financially independent and not dependent on other people's money, that sort of thing, if Libra is ruling the house. But again, if that's flipped around, if you have Libra up here in the 8th house and Aries down here, then that means, okay, so again, if you've got if you've got Libra here, if you've got Libra in the 2nd house, that means the South Node, the drain point, is going to be going through your house of money, material possessions, and values. And for myself, when I had to experience that transit, oh, good Lord, I think I spent something like $5,000 on vet bills. It was like one after another, animals that were having, serious problems that were not something I could manage on my own. I'm not one that just rushes off to the vet for no reason. I generally try to take responsibility on my own and figure out how to heal my animals myself, but these were very serious problems. So there's that. But it could also mean that, so if you have Libra here in the 2nd house and you've got Aries up here, then that might mean money's coming in through a partner or through a government funding thing or something like that. It's other people's money. If you have Aries up here, the North Node is bringing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's definitely going to happen, because this could also mean if the North Node, if Aries is up here, if you have Aries up here, I hope I didn't scrub. Hopefully you guys are following along here. If you have Aries up here in the 8th house, that might mean that North Node going through the sign of Aries is just trying to push on a transformational process, trying to bring you the transformational process. Oh boy, I hope that I'm making this clear and concise enough for you guys to be able to follow along. Okay, so the 3rd house, this is the house of communication and sharing information, and can also have a lot to do with siblings, and can also have a lot to do with little tiny short distance travels. Like, oh my gosh. Okay, so let's see if Aries ruling your 3rd house, your house of communication. And that means that the North Node up in the sky is going to be transiting through so the dragon's head, where energy comes in, is going into the area of your life that rules over these things: communication, short distance travel, or siblings. Okay, so maybe it has something to do with any type of communication, whether it be verbal or written, or it could, all of a sudden all this energy comes out that has to do with your siblings. Something happens with your sibling, or it could also be like all of a sudden, I gotta, for whatever reason, I got signed up for this thing where I have to drive, just 4 miles away 3 times a day, that sort of thing. It could be that. Okay. And then opposite that would mean that the South Node would be up here in your 9th house, which is the house of higher learning and advanced knowledge and long distance travel, expanding the consciousness. This 3rd house is more like the narrowed in, like, mental function. And this 9th house is more like the big, looking at the big picture. And so if you got the South Node transiting through there, it's probably not a time to be doing long distance traveling. And it's time to be focused more on the narrow part of things rather than the bigger part of things, maybe a little more mental rather than philosophical. Okay. And again, if you have Aries up here, then the North Node is going through. It would be exactly the opposite. It would be a good time for long distance travel and studying philosophy and expanding your consciousness, going to metaphysical studies or something like that, and less time focused in on the narrow stuff, and less time on the mental function, and less time on the communication skills, that sort of thing. Okay, now 4th house, this is the house of home, property, real estate. Can also have to do with parents, mother or father. I do notice it tends to be more mother energy coming through this 4th house, but I've seen it with both. So 4th house, if you have Aries here, then that North Node going through the sign of Aries is going to be bringing the energy into the area of your life that rules over these things. Maybe you get a new house, or maybe something aggressive happens with your house. Okay, as I was mentioning, it's like this fiery energy, North Node, dragon's head coming in. And if it's your karma, like, I hate to say it, but it could be something like your house burns down because this, this energy coming in. But it could also be, again, like you buy a new house, or something happens with your parents, or something in your immediate environment. Okay. Or whatever you think of as home. It doesn't have to be the home that you live in. maybe you haven't been able to live in a normal home, and all of a sudden this, especially if you got something in there, a celestial body in there, and if it's triggered by an eclipse with that North Node, all of a sudden, boom, oh my gosh, I finally got the house of my dreams. Okay. And then again, just opposite that, the 10th house up here is the house of career, public life, status, recognition. So that would mean if you have Aries down here, that would mean you have Libra up here. That would mean the South Node is going through your house of career, status, recognition. Again, that's the South Node, the drain point, the dragon's tail. Generally speaking, this is not a peak of somebody's career when the South Node transits through the 10th house. Okay, if you're super career oriented, that can kind of feel like a little bit of a rough transit. But again, there are things that can also counteract this. I want to make sure I say this. If you're still with me, hopefully I've rambled too much and you guys are still with me. Every once in a while, the energy of these nodes will flip. And I'm not talking about as a collective, I'm talking about for specific people. If you have something in your chart that counteracts this, you're having like a reverse nodal return, or if something is going on in your chart, it can flip things around. But for the most part, wherever the South Node is going through, it's not the most ideal time to be focusing on that area of your life. Okay, so just the opposite of that. If you have Aries ruling your 10th house, if you've got Aries up here in this area, that means the energy is coming in through your house of career. That could be a really good thing for some people. That could be like totally like an eclipse triggers your 10th house and boom, your career takes off, especially through the sign of Aries. It could take off in a fiery way. Or it could be something like your career all of a sudden, it's like things get really frustrating, because again, we're talking about the sign of Aries. Something could happen that's really frustrating. Okay, so there's that. Now, that's just the opposite again. If you have Libra down here in your 4th house, that means the energy is draining out. Not all the time, only when the South Node is transiting through the sign of Libra. All of a sudden you sell your house or you lose your house. I don't mean like all of a sudden you couldn't pay the payments or something like that. And you lose your home, or your landlord says you got to move or something like that. Or again, it could have to do with parents, that sort of thing. Okay, the 5th house. This is the house of creativity and children, and can also have a lot to do with, it certainly can be applied to you having children or your own children, but it can also be applied, because not everybody has children, can be applied to whatever it is you're creating for the world. Like I like to think of this as like, entrepreneur kind of energy that comes through that 5th house. So with that said, if you have Aries down here, okay, which this chart happens to have, there's the symbol for the sign of Aries. So if this was somebody's natal chart and I knew, this is what's going on, okay, I'd be like, boom, my eyes would go directly to where the sign of Aries is. If somebody just sent me their natal chart, I would go directly to where the sign of Aries is. There it is, bingo. It's in the 5th house, the house of children and creativity. And now the North Node's going to go transiting through that house, that area of your life. You might have a baby. Something could happen with your children. Something aggressive could happen with your children. Again, this is a sign of Aries we're talking about. Or it could be something along the lines of, you entrepreneured something, you created something, and now it's taking off. I built something, I created this for the world, and now it's taking off because this North Node is coming through there. Rahu's coming through there and bringing the Aries energy through his pump. Okay. So there's that. And just opposite that, if you've got Libra up here, again, now you can see it in this chart. Here's Aries. Here's the symbol for Aries. Here's the symbol for Libra. We see Libra up here. Those houses are opposite each other. So that would mean that the South Node up in the sky is going to be transiting through this 11th house. This 11th house is the house of associates, hopes and wishes, kind of like networking, connecting with other people, okay? Making things happen together as a team. And with that said, if the South Node is going through if the South Node up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Libra, and you have Libra in your 11th house, that means it might not be so focused on your groups of friends. It might not be the best time for networking and connecting with other people. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't. I wouldn't be like, oh, don't talk to anybody while the South Node is transiting through your 11th house. But it's just a hard time to like make things happen with those associates and groups of people. Okay. And again, just the opposite of that. If you have Aries up in this 11th house, this house of networking with others, then boom, all of a sudden, everything's coming into your life. Like people are just from random places coming into your life. Let's network together. Let's make this happen. That sort of thing. And that would mean you'd have Libra down here, which would mean it's not the best time. I'm not going to say that people shouldn't try and get pregnant while the South Node is in their 5th house, their house of children and creativity, but it might not be the most ideal time to be trying to have a baby. It might not be the most ideal time for trying to create something for the world. Okay, last one here. The 6th house. This is the house of physical health and being of service. Okay, now, if you've got Aries ruling your 6th house, your house of physical health and being of service, if you see that symbol for the sign of Aries landing in your 6th house, then energy is coming in through the area of your life that rules over your physical health and how you're being of service. And I've had the North Node going through this 6th house. And when it entered into there, I did get a little concerned about my physical health. And so I started trying to take a little bit extra good care of my physical health. But it didn't manifest that way for me. It was more like all of a sudden I was totally having to be of service. I mean, what I mean is like work. Okay. The 6th house can have a lot to do with work, not necessarily career, but being of service work. Okay. And so with that, if you've got Aries ruling your 6th house, that North Node is either going to bring in being of service or could affect your physical health. Okay. And the reason I brought that up about myself is because I just want people to know that it didn't for me, hallelujah, but it can certainly affect people's physical health when that 6th house gets triggered. Okay. What that would mean, if you have Aries over here, that means you'd have Libra over here in the 12th house, which the 12th house, this is the house of karma. Okay. The house has so much to do with, our spiritual side of life. Sometimes this 12th house is called the house of self-undoing or the house of spiritual debt. Okay. And that's, I think spiritual sounds lovely, right? But it's not always. This 12th house is actually, in ancient astrology, the 12th house is considered a cursed house. Okay. It means maybe you might have done something that was so great in a previous lifetime, if you got like major activity going on in the 12th house, but that also could be the opposite too. That also could be because sometimes if it's like you got Venus in the 12th, and especially if she's maybe in the sign of Pisces, then that's a beautiful place for Venus. So it's not like the 12th house is always bad, but it is about your karmic debt. Okay. So if you've got Libra ruling that means you're letting go of karma. You're letting go of things that it's going out. Okay. Maybe you built up some karma. And if you've got Libra ruling your 12th house and there's some karmic energy that you want to let go of, this is the perfect time to do it. Okay. And just the opposite of that again, if you've got Aries ruling your house of karma, your 12th house, then the energy's coming in. You got karmic stuff coming into your 12th house. It could be a very, very spiritual journey for you over these next 18 months. If you are a Scorpio rising, because that would mean Libra's on your 12th house. Okay. So that energy would be coming in through your 12th house. And then that would mean Libra's in your 6th house, and energy's going out through that 6th house. Again, that's another one. Your physical health could be drained, or all of a sudden you don't have to be of service. Okay. So hopefully you guys were able to follow along well enough with that. And I understand if you're really new to this stuff, it's going to be very, very overwhelming. Please don't feel intimidated, because this is, really, if you just learn it step by step by step, really, really good stuff to learn and understand and apply it to your own life. Now, one more thing I want to mention here. These are the symbols for the nodes right here. Where I'm moving my mouse, that is the North Node. This right here is the South Node. They're identical symbols, glyphs. Okay. But the North Node is like, they look like horseshoes, really. And they actually represent what the symbols are trying to show is that as the moon's going around her orbit, one side as she's going up and the other side as she's going down. Okay, this north node looks like a horseshoe that is, or headphones that you put on. And the south node is like if you were to put your headphones on upside down. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so I think I kind of covered everything. Let me just look at this chart for a minute. I'll just point this out to you. So this eclipse that's coming up on, this is not till October 14th. We will be having, in fact, I'll show you, I'll leave you with this stuff, okay? Anytime that we have a solar eclipse, we have to be having a new moon. We have to have a new moon in order to have a solar eclipse. When we have a new moon, what it means is the moon, here's the moon right here. That's the glyph for the moon. And here's the glyph for the sun. Okay. They are both at 21 degrees Libra and 8 minutes. They're exactly in the same spot. That's when we have a new moon. The moon goes around this thing every single month. Okay. Goes around this circle every single month. The sun takes a whole year to go around this thing. So with that said, the moon catches up to the sun every single month because she goes faster. And when she does, that's when we have a new moon. When we have a new moon and either the north, this is the south, either the south or the north node, one of these guys has to be close to the sun and the moon for it to be a solar eclipse. They have to be very, very close to the sun and the moon. Not sometimes I've seen it up to like 15 degrees away, but they have to be decently close in order for it to be a solar eclipse. So with that said, and I'll put more information about this as we go along here throughout these next 18 months, but I'm trying not to make this too long, but because here's the sun, here's the moon at 21 degrees Libra, that means we're having this solar eclipse at 21 degrees Libra. If you have something in your natal chart, and this is a south node solar eclipse, if you have something in your natal chart that is near 21 degrees Libra, if it's within like really even 10 degrees, that's kind of a big orb, but if it's somewhere near 10 degrees Libra, or sorry, 21 degrees Libra, then this eclipse is very powerful for you. And it means something is going to be taking energy away from whatever celestial body that is that you have at 21 degrees Libra. So for example, again, if you've got Mars at 21 degrees Libra, then all of a sudden this eclipse hits, and it may happen within 2 weeks before or 4 weeks after, or approximately 90 days after, or approximately 180 days later, but something that has to do with that specific energy is, if it's Mars, it would be something along with your energy level, or maybe it's something like you've been in a fight with somebody for a long time. This jerk, down the street, I've been battling this guy forever. Well, because it's Mars. That's Mars. Mars rules like fighting. Okay. Then all of a sudden this eclipse comes in and it takes it away. It takes it away. And please understand that this does not generally happen on the day of an eclipse. Okay. Now, should I show you guys? Now, just, you know what? I'm going to end this here because I've already probably made it too long. And not only that, but I will be putting more information out about this. But if you want to, if you want to schedule a reading and really finely tune and understand how this specifically impacts your life, you can schedule straight through my website, erinwageastrology.com. And I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.